Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're tackling mindfulness and enlightenment.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is, it is. But we've got some really great source material to work with.
We do.
We're diving into this series of lectures by this expert in Buddhist teachings.
Yeah,
And this expert just has a way of explaining these concepts that can be kind of head-scratchy sometimes.
absolutely. And they do it in a way that just clicks, you know? It's like, finally, someone gets it.
Right, right. And they don't make you feel like you have to like wade through a bunch of like jargon or anything.
Oh, absolutely not. They're all about clarity.
Exactly. And it's like they're handing you this like fast track to knowledge.
Yeah, like an express lane.
Yeah. And they actually compare their teachings to an owner's manual for your mind.
I love that analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you could drive a car without understanding the mechanics, but having that deeper knowledge makes the whole experience so much smoother and more fulfilling.
Right. You're not just driving around cluelessly.
Exactly.
You know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah. And I love how this expert kind of playfully jabs at people who never read manuals.
They're like, come on, people.
Right. Right. He's like, there's a reason they give you these things.
Exactly. There's wisdom in those pages.
There is. There is. And speaking of wisdom,
Yes.
the expert lays out these three types of knowledge.
Okay, I'm listening.
So we have knowledge from listening or
Mhm.
reading.
Mm.
We've got knowledge from thinking and analyzing,
Okay.
and then knowledge from direct experience.
Oh, the trifecta.
Right. And what's so cool is how they apply this to stuff we experience every day.
Oh, I love when they do that. It makes it so relatable.
Yeah. Like it's not just this abstract philosophical stuff. It's actually like, how do we live our lives?
Yeah, like how does this apply to me right here, right now?
Exactly. Exactly.
Then it doesn't matter if you're a Buddhist scholar or just someone who's curious about life.
Right. Right. Because we all have these experiences.
You do.
And like they give this example of learning to ride a bike. Right.
Yeah.
You can read all the instructions, watch all the YouTube videos. You can break down the physics of balance.
Right.
But nothing compares to actually getting on the bike and feeling it for yourself.
Exactly. It's that direct experience that solidifies the learning, you know?
Yes. And that direct experience, that's where the expert's example of extinguishing a negative feeling really clicks for me.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
So they talk about this idea of almost like hitting delete on a thought
Interesting.
instead of getting all caught up in it and trying to rationalize it away and analyze it.
So it's about letting go rather than overthinking.
Yeah, like almost like recognizing that you have that power.
Huh. What do you think about that? Is it really that simple?
Well, I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely something to be said for not getting swept away by every single thought that pops into our heads.
Right, because if we did, we'd be exhausted.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it speaks to this idea of like we have this power to choose which thoughts we give energy to.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Right, we're not just victims of our thoughts.
We have agency.
We do. We
Yeah.
do. And this leads us to this concept of no self, which is one of the most fundamental, but also sometimes one of the most confusing ideas in Buddhism.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky.
Right, because it's like, wait a minute, if there's no self, then who am I?
Right, exactly. Like, I'm obviously here. I
Okay.
exist, right?
Right,
So how can there be no self?
right, right. And that's where this expert's approach is really helpful.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Because they focus on this feeling of non-control as the core of no self.
Non-control.
Yeah, and they have this really interesting example
Okay.
involving cutting a strand of hair.
Cutting hair. Okay.
Yeah, so imagine like you have a strand of your hair cut.
Okay.
It's still technically your hair.
It came from my head?
Right, but you don't have that same sense of control over it anymore.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right, and it's such a simple act,
Huh.
but it illustrates this idea that our sense of self is often based on clinging to these things that are constantly changing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's a really great example of how the expert takes these abstract concepts and grounds them in a tangible experience.
Exactly. Because we can intellectually understand that everything is impermanent, but this example helps us feel it on a deeper level.
Right, and they don't stop there.
Okay.
They also bring up things like aging and hair color.
Yeah, those are things we can all relate to.
Right, like we can't control those natural processes no matter how hard we try.
Nope. Father Time is undefeated.
He is, and it's a powerful reminder that our sense of self is fluid and constantly evolving, not fixed and unchanging like we sometimes think.
And that brings us back to those fast tracks of knowledge you mentioned earlier, right?
Yes.
By observing these everyday examples of impermanence, we can start to chip away at that illusion of a solid, unchanging self, which is a key step on that path to enlightenment.
Exactly. exactly. And, you know, I know a lot of our listeners are probably wondering about this whole letting go aspect of Buddhism.
Yeah, letting go can be a tough one.
It can, and we actually got a question from a listener about how non-attachment can coexist with things like compassion and loving kindness.
That's a great question.
It is, because it seems like a paradox, right?
Mhm.
How can we truly love if we're not supposed to cling?
It's a tricky balance.
It is, and the expert uses this really vivid analogy of holding a cat too tightly
Okay, I'm intrigued.
versus appreciating a butterfly.
All right, let's hear it.
So they describe how if you try to like desperately cling to a cat and control its every move, you're actually going to like smother the connection.
Right, you're gonna get scratched.
You are. You are.
That's gonna bolt.
Exactly. But with a butterfly, you appreciate its beauty without needing to like trap it.
Yeah, you let it be free.
Right. You allow it to be free.
Hmm.
And that freedom actually creates a deeper, more genuine connection.
It's beautiful imagery. And it really clarifies that difference between possessive love and true compassion.
Yes. Because true compassion doesn't require clinging or possessiveness.
Right.
It allows us to be present with others without needing to control them or change them.
It's about acceptance, really.
It is.
Allowing people to be who they are
Exactly. Exactly.
without judgment.
Exactly. And so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about this owner's manual for the mind,
Yeah.
where we've talked about the different types of knowledge,
Yeah.
that power of hitting delete on negative thoughts, and this paradox of no self.
It's been a whirlwind tour.
It has. It has. But the expert doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
There's more.
Okay.
They go on to explore this really intriguing concept of unborn.
Unborn, okay.
Yeah, this is a state beyond the cycle of birth and death.
Wow, that's getting pretty deep.
It is.
It's mind-blowing.
And in the next part, we're going to dive deeper into this concept of unborn and explore how it's actually closer than we think.
I can't wait. Let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back to unravel this mystery. All right, so unborn.
Yeah, this unborn
Right.
concept.
It's right next to us all the time.
Okay.
So the expert talks about this idea of the gap.
Okay.
Imagine a light. It's blinking on and off, on and off.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in those moments of darkness?
Between the bursts of light.
Yeah.
It's like we don't even see those spaces, right?
Uh-huh.
But they're always there.
Yeah, they're invisible to us, but essential.
The expert is saying during those gaps,
That's where it's at.
there's no physical form, no thoughts, no perceptions.
As we usually know them.
Right. It's like,
It's like hitting the pause button on reality.
oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah, like everything just stops.
And in that pause is pure potential.
Hmm.
It's a state that's unconditioned by our usual ways of thinking.
Okay, so how do we tap into that?
How do we tap into the gap?
Yeah, this unborn state
Right. It sounds like we need a different kind of energy.
to break free from those patterns
Exactly. You got it.
or usual patterns.
Yeah. And the expert compares it to like an electron jumping to a higher orbit. It needs that extra surge of energy.
To break free.
Right. To break free from its current state.
And they're saying this energy comes from deepening our mindfulness,
It does.
becoming more aware of the stops.
The endings.
Right, so it's not just about noticing things,
Yeah.
but noticing how they end.
Exactly.
Okay, so like how they fade away.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see how that might help us loosen our grip on things,
did.
our attachment to this fixed sense of self.
Exactly, because by acknowledging the impermanence of everything,
Yeah,
we start to weaken that clinging.
to a solid me.
Right.
And that opens up the possibility of tapping into that unborn energy.
It does.
I know some people might be thinking like, enlightenment sounds great.
But like, do I really need to reach that level?
Yeah, to benefit from this stuff.
Right, and that's where this idea of dividends comes in.
Dividends, okay.
Yeah, it's like even if you don't make it to the summit of the mountain, the journey itself is incredibly rewarding.
I like that. So even if someone isn't striving for full enlightenment,
Right.
practicing mindfulness can still bring those
Yeah.
dividends.
Exactly.
That calmness, that peace, this sense of letting go.
You get to enjoy the scenery along the way.
Oh, I love that.
And speaking of scenery,
Yeah.
the expert uses this amazing metaphor to
ahead.
describe the allure of unborn.
All right, lay it on me.
Imagine you're offered a glimpse of the most breathtaking landscape you can possibly imagine.
Okay.
Wouldn't you want to experience that?
Even just for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to see that?
Exactly.
It makes me think of those moments when you catch a glimpse of like a stunning sunset
Yeah.
and you just feel this sense of awe.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing the world with fresh eyes?
Yeah, that sense of wonder.
Yeah, is that what the expert is pointing to?
It's definitely in that realm.
With unborn?
Yeah, it's about accessing this level of peace and joy
Mm-hmm.
that goes beyond our usual ups and downs.
Beyond that constant striving
Right.
for something more.
Yeah, just being present in the moment.
Okay, but let's be real.
Okay.
There are challenges.
Right.
There are always
Like
challenges.
we were talking about that listener's question,
Yeah.
about how non-attachment can coexist with compassion.
Right, because it feels like a paradox.
It does. How can you love without clinging?
Right.
And the expert tackles it head on
They do.
with this really relatable analogy.
Okay.
They compare clinging to love to holding a cat too tightly.
I like this one.
If you squeeze too hard, it's going to want to escape.
The cat's going to scratch you.
Yeah, but if you hold it gently,
Mhm.
allowing it space to breathe,
Yeah,
it'll happily stay.
exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Right, so it's not about becoming cold or detached, but finding that balance where we can love deeply
Yes.
without suffocating the other person.
With our expectations and our need to control.
It's about letting go of the need to control.
Yes. True compassion doesn't require clinging
It doesn't.
or possessiveness.
Right.
It's about allowing others to be themselves
Mhm.
while still holding them in our hearts.
With love and kindness.
Exactly. And the expert also talks about different types of knowledge.
Oh, there's more than 3.
Yeah, they even go beyond those 3 categories we talked about earlier.
Okay.
They bring up this concept called sana,
Santa. Okay.
which seems to be about a more immediate, like direct kind of knowing.
Immediate knowing.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember that bike riding example.
Yeah, the classic bike riding example.
Yeah. So sana is like that moment
Okay.
when you just instinctively know how to balance,
Ah, you just know
how to steer.
without even thinking about it.
Yeah. Without having to consciously think about it.
It's like a deeper level of awareness
Yes.
than simply recalling facts.
Or memories. So it's not just about what we know,
No.
but how we know it.
Exactly.
Sana seems to be about experiencing the world with fresh eyes, free from those filters of our past experiences.
And preconceived notions.
Exactly. It's like seeing the world as it truly is.
In this very moment.
Yes, without all that mental baggage.
Right. And this whole idea of Santa,
Yeah.
it reminds me of something else the expert talked about,
Okay.
how we often mistake our interpretations for reality.
Ooh, that's a good one.
They use the analogy of seeing a tree.
Okay.
We think we're seeing the tree itself,
Right.
but what we're really perceiving is our mental construct of a tree,
Oh, that makes sense.
shaped by our past experiences.
Yeah, and the labels we've learned.
Exactly. So it's like we're seeing the world through a lens, and that lens is made up of our beliefs, assumptions, past experiences.
Right, so it's not the raw data.
No.
It's our interpretation of it.
Exactly. And that brings us to the role of language
Ooh, language.
in shaping our reality.
Okay.
The expert uses the analogy of a game. Just like the rules of a game determine how pieces are used and what moves are allowed,
Boy.
the words we use create a framework
Yeah.
for how we understand and interact with the world.
Okay, I'm following.
So it's like the word goal.
Goal.
In one context, it might refer to a personal aspiration, but in a sports context,
Right.
it has a very specific meaning.
Defined by the rules of the game?
Exactly. And the expert's point is
Yeah.
we need to be mindful of the game that's being played.
When we encounter a word or a concept.
Right, because the meaning isn't inherent in the word itself, but rather in how it's used within a particular system of understanding.
So how do we start to see through those limitations?
Of language
Yeah.
and those mental constructs we often mistake for reality.
Yeah, how do we get to that raw data?
Well, the expert suggests
Yeah.
mindfulness is key.
Mindfulness.
By paying close attention to our experience, we can start to notice the gap
Between our
in
perceptions.
the actual reality
That's unfolding.
right in front of us.
So we're becoming more aware of the player,
Behind the moves,
the observer.
behind the thoughts.
Yes, this reminds me of something else. The expert discussed the 5 hindrances.
Ah, yes, those uninvited guests
Right.
that show up at our mental doorstep.
And just wreck everything.
They disrupt our inner peace.
Yeah, so the expert describes them as sensual desire, sloth and torture,
Restlessness and worry.
and doubt.
It's a whole crew of troublemakers.
It is.
And they can really cloud our awareness
prevent us from experiencing that peace.
and freedom.
Right, but the good news is
So it's good news.
the expert offers some advice.
Okay.
for dealing with these unwelcome visitors.
All right, what do we do?
So they emphasize the importance of recognizing when they're present.
Okay, so awareness is the first step.
It is, and then applying specific techniques
Oh.
to overcome them.
So, like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed by sensual desire,
Yeah.
what can I do?
You might try shifting your attention
Okay.
to something less stimulating
Right.
or engaging in a calming activity.
Gotcha. And if I'm struggling with ill will?
Toward someone.
Yeah, like if I'm holding a grudge.
You might practice loving-kindness meditation,
Ah.
cultivating those feelings of compassion.
Forgiveness.
Yes. And the key is to develop this personalized toolkit of practices
Oh, I like that, a toolkit.
that you can draw upon whenever these hindrances arise.
So we're not caught off guard.
Exactly.
We have a plan.
We have a plan, we're prepared.
We can maintain that inner balance.
And clarity.
I like it.
Okay, so we've got our Santa working.
Yep.
We're watching out for those 5 hindrances.
Right.
What else does the expert offer in terms of navigating this path?
Well, they dive into the 5 aggregates.
5 aggregates, okay.
Form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Okay, so these are like the building blocks of our experience.
They are the building blocks.
It makes me think of those construction toys where you can put different pieces together.
To create different structures.
Yeah, are the aggregates like the building blocks?
Of our sense of self.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
They emphasize that these aggregates are constantly changing.
They're always in flux,
and interacting.
which creates that illusion.
Of a solid, enduring self.
But in reality,
There's no thing
we can point to.
and say, this is me.
So it's like a constantly changing mosaic.
Mm-hmm.
But we tend to see it as a fixed image.
Exactly.
And clinging to these aggregates.
As me or mine.
That's the root of suffering.
It is the root of suffering.
Because when we identify with these impermanent phenomena
We become attached.
and we experience pain
When they inevitably change.
or disappear,
Yeah, it's the nature of impermanence.
this ties back to that concept of non-self,
It does.
right? So it's not that we don't exist,
No.
but rather our sense of self
Is more fluid
and less solid.
than we typically believe.
Okay, so how do we start to loosen our grip?
On those aggregates, on that fixed sense of self,
Yeah.
the expert emphasizes the power of mindfulness
And mindfulness again.
by cultivating a clear awareness of the 5 aggregates
We can start to disidentify
and experience a sense of liberation.
from that cycle of craving and aversion.
It's like we're becoming the observer of the river.
Not getting swept away by the current.
Exactly.
This is all incredibly insightful.
It is profound.
But I'm curious to know what the expert suggests
Yes.
in terms of practical steps.
For cultivating mindfulness.
Yeah, and moving towards that unborn state.
Well, that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. We'll delve into the expert's specific recommendations.
For incorporating these teachings into our daily lives.
Stay tuned, everybody. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring mindfulness and enlightenment, and I'm excited to hear what the expert suggests for integrating these concepts into our lives.
Well, the expert doesn't just leave us hanging.
I like that.
They give us some concrete ways to put these ideas into practice. Remember, non-self.
Yeah, the big one.
They make it clear that understanding non-self isn't about erasing our individuality
Right.
or becoming indifferent. It's actually about freeing ourselves from the limitations of a fixed identity.
So it's not about becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
Not at all. It's more about recognizing our sense of self is fluid, not fixed. And they use this great example, clinging to possessions.
Okay.
When we identify with our belongings, we create a false sense of self-worth.
Based on external things.
Right. And this leads to attachment, anxiety, and that chase for more.
It's like we tie our happiness to things that are constantly changing.
Exactly. A recipe for disappointment.
Yeah.
But when we understand non-self, we can appreciate and enjoy things without being enslaved.
Ah, okay.
We can use possessions as tools.
Instead of sources of validation.
Yeah, like shifting from a mindset of owning to using.
Oh, that's good.
And this applies to our relationships achievements,
Yeah.
even our bodies.
Oh, wow.
We can appreciate these parts of our lives without clinging to them as self.
That makes me think about comparing ourselves to others.
Hmm.
You know, basing our worth on external measures.
Absolutely. And the expert highlights clinging to a fixed self. It leads to conflict and suffering in relationships too.
Right. We try to control others.
mold them into our image, resist change that threatens our identity.
It's like we try to force everyone into boxes.
Exactly. But when we let go of that rigid me and
Okay,
mine,
see.
we can approach relationships with openness and acceptance. Appreciate others for who they are.
Giving them space.
Right. To be themselves, without fitting into our preconceived notions.
That sounds so freeing, both for ourselves and the people we care about.
It is.
Yeah.
It creates space for connection and growth.
Okay, let's circle back to this idea of the unborn state.
Okay, yeah.
It really stretches the mind
Oh.
because it goes beyond our usual born and dead thinking.
It does. It's like trying to imagine a color you've never seen.
Real-
The expert uses this great analogy. Imagine starts and stops with gaps in between.
Okay.
Our usual life experience is like a constant stream of starts and stops, always clinging to the next thing. Unborn is pure being, unbound by the cycle of grasping.
So it's like the space between the inhale and the exhale.
Yes, the stillness at the heart of movement.
Okay.
They explain moving toward unborn needs a different kind of energy, like an electron jumping to a higher orbit,
Right.
letting go of attachments, preconceived notions,
Even our sense of self.
surrendering to something bigger than ourselves.
It sounds more like waking up to a reality that's always been there.
Exactly. They say even a glimpse of this unborn state can have a profound impact,
Wow.
bringing peace, joy, and liberation beyond anything we can experience in the born realm.
So how do we cultivate unborn awareness? Is there a map?
The expert introduces yanas.
Giannis, okay.
There are different stages or vehicles on the path to enlightenment.
Different roads up the same mountain.
That's a good way to think about it. They compare them to levels in a building, starting with understanding the mind and body are distinct, and then, guided through progressively higher levels, deeper understanding of reality.
I love the analogy of swinging across a chasm.
Oh, yeah.
We cling to a rope, our attachments,
Right.
and then let go to reach the other side. Enlightenment
Powerful image. As we progress, we must let go.
of everything.
Attachments, notions, even ourselves.
That's both exciting and scary.
It is a journey requiring courage and trust. And the expert reminds us it's not about reaching a distant goal.
But the journey itself,
It's about transforming ourselves,
every moment.
cultivating awareness, compassion, wisdom in all aspects of our lives.
Okay, I see. So it's about the journey, not just the destination.
Precisely. And they leave us with this question: do I want to go to the world of the unborn?
Wow.
It invites us to reflect on our deepest values and aspirations. What do we truly seek? What would it mean to live from that unborn awareness?
It's a powerful invitation to step outside comfort zones and explore what's possible.
It is.
We've covered so much ground,
We have.
exploring mindfulness and enlightenment, uncovering practical techniques and profound insights.
We hope these teachings resonate with you.
Explore the practices, reflect on the analogies.
And most importantly, experience these truths for yourself.
What would it feel like to access that unborn energy, even for a moment? What possibilities might open up in your life? Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.